Well, good morning, or I should say good morning, because you might be doing it in the evening or night. Anyway, welcome to this new class. Welcome. We are doing World History 2. World History 2. It is very important that you understand history and love history. Do you love history? History is not just reading a book, What you're doing here, you're just doing a course, a history course. But history is deeper than that. Right? I am a historian. That's one of the hats I wear. And history has to do with research. And this book, written by 4 professors, is considered, and works like these, not just this book, but all books, are called secondary information. A historian writing a book has to have more information than just secondary information. He has to have primary information. He has to go into archives. He may have to go into the fields and research, depending on what he's doing, and factories, and talk to kings and queens and get letters and notes and correspondences and so on, in order to support his views and what he's writing. Let us pray. Father, thank you for today. Thank you for the participants in this course. I present them to you, and I present myself to you. I present the system to you, and I engage to make this course possible. I pray, Father, that you take control. I pray you bless. I pray, some Lord, that you lead and direct. I pray, Lord, that your will be done. Amen. Praise God. So, world history. We're doing world history. World history 2. And for you to do world history 2 means you would have to do world history 1. And pass it, as we could not allow you to do world history 2. Now we are going to be looking at the big subject. World history is a subject. There's a sub point, and there are many sub points that will follow. The West and the changing world balance. The Western world, it does that word here, but that's what it's talking about. The Western world and the changing world balance. Just let me preface by saying, here, I know exactly where I want to pick up. The world in 1400 was in fundamental transition. The world is in transition now. The world is always in a state of transition. But look at the adjective, fundamental transition, and that is true. What we are going to be doing now will bring out the main features of this transition. The principal focus is on shifts in the balance of power between civilizations in Asia, shifts in the balance of power between civilizations in Asia, Africa, and Europe, and related changes in the nature of international contact. Europe is just rising now. Hasn't reached anywhere significant as yet, but just rising because all along, especially Western Europe, was in the back bush or the backwaters. Up to this point, Western Europe. Eastern Europe, like Greece and so on, was different. They have had glorious time, because Greece was a world power at one time. But we talk about the West now. Western Europe is picking up certain things and learning certain things. Certain things have begun to happen there to balance the power, right, in the world scale, on the world scale. This period of transition in the 14th and early 15th centuries began with the decline of Arab strength. So you have decline and you have improvement In other words, kingdoms wax and the kingdoms wane. So while the Arabs, let me say the Arabs, or the Arab world was declining, the strength was declining, the strength of Western Europe was waxing. The decline of Arab strength is symbolized in the fall of the last Arab Caliphate in 1258. So that created a vacuum. This world has had many empires, some larger than some, but many powerful empires. So the Arab Caliphate, and the Caliphate was made up of the Sunni Muslims in the main. They were the leaders, the Sunni Muslims. And the disruption that Mongol incursions caused elsewhere in Asia and Eastern Europe. We have looked at the Mongol period already. They've created a lot of havoc in China and India and Eastern Europe. At one time they were threatening Western Europe, but decline set in. And the Middle East, Asia and Eastern Europe and the Middle East, right? So at a point your energy will be spent. That is true of an individual, and it is true of an organization. It is true of churches. It's true of denominations. And so long as it lasts, if the denomination lasts, at a point, somebody is going to come on the scene to awaken it. The same thing happens to a political party, or political parties, right? They don't remain strong all the time. And that's why when you're strong, be careful how you oppress and exploit the weak, because the same weak is going to wax when you're waning and take charge of you. So Mongol incursions and so on impacted it. The Mongols declined before them because they had overextended themselves and had become exhausted and started losing battles. These developments created new opportunities in the international network that had been established in the post-classical centuries. We have looked at that. The pre-classical centuries, the ancient world, and the classical world. We have looked at those already. Initially, under Arab sponsorship, right? Various candidates emerged to take a new international role, including for a short time China in its new Ming dynasty, but it didn't last. The most dynamic new contender for international power ultimately proved to be Western Europe. The most dynamic new contender for international power ultimately proved to be Western Europe, even though it was not one bloc. One bloc in the sense that one sovereignty. They were Western Europe consisted of sovereign states, and some of the states, were what do you call now? Existed in city-states, like Italy, and so on. And they talk about the period of the wow, it's slipping me. At this time, Europe existed, the city-states, feudalism, right? Feudalism reigned in Europe at the time. Feudalism. So, Western Europe, where am I coming to? Right. The most dynamic new contender for international power ultimately proved to be Western Europe. And the conditions that propelled Western Europe civilization toward a new position around 1400 are the second key theme that we are going to be considering here. The West was not yet the world's major power, not yet. It did not replace the Arabs as international leaders quickly or easily. The first stages of the rise of the West were accompanied by important changes in Western civilization itself, also taking shape by about 1400. We're going to be looking at those. At this point, Italy, Spain, and Portugal took a new leadership role in West European outreach, which they would hold for about 2 centuries. Spain experienced some great changes in the 1400 because Muslims had captured Spain, 3/4 of Spain at a point. And Spain was considered Christian, but Muslims had captured them. They came from a section of Africa that is close to that section of Europe. So they crossed in boats, ships, and they captured them. But at a point, and the reason for that was that, again, the city-states, when King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella married, they united 2 city-states. So they were able to pool resources, human resources and other resources. And when they did that, they were able now to outflank the Arabs or the Muslims that were there. And many of them were Arabs, some were Africans that were there, and push them out. And that created, a big shift, because the Arab power was declining too. So it would be difficult for them to be reinforced, and they were invaders, right? To be reinforced. But because so a number of factors played out to accomplish that. It is also vital to note changes in the societies outside the international network. In the Americas and Polynesia, these societies were not part of the international network. New difficulties in the great American empires in particular inadvertently reduced the ability to respond to a European challenge that was about to arrive. They were unable to respond. They were able to respond on a number of grounds. One of them, they had not yet developed the wheel, so they could not make chariots. They didn't have anything with wheel. They didn't have explosives. They didn't have guns, things like that. Focusing on new frameworks for international contacts. This we are going to be looking at the question of why individual civilizations reacted differently to key forces. This was a vital period of redefinition comparable to the centuries that led from the classical to post-classical period, but with developments that had even wider sweep. So, social and cultural decline preceded the rise to power and fame in the West. In the Middle East, social and cultural decline preceded the power the rise to power in the Middle East. So, with the Moguls developed the first alternative international framework with their interlocking holdings that included Central Asia, China, and Russia, with trusts into the Middle East and South Asia. Here was a system that actively encouraged international travelers and provided unprecedented opportunities for changes of technology, and not just changes of technology, but technological exchange and ideas, exchanges that particularly benefited Western Europe through contacts with Asia and Russia. The Mongol Decline, first in China, the Mongol, because you see, they invade. China has a population of 500 million, or 300 million, or even 100 million. The Mongols have the country, and it is soldiers who go out to fight. They have soldiers, they may have 50,000, 100,000 soldiers in China. China, they have 100,000 in the Middle East, and they spread out. 100,000 in Europe, Eastern Europe, and they spread out. In the sense that they have different countries, so some here, some there. But that is small compared to the size of the population there. When they call for reinforcement, now that would be is not something easy because they didn't have telephone. So men would have to leave on horses, 2 or 3 of them, and convince them that they needed help and backup and reinforcement. The country that they are holding, or they have invaded, or they're seeking to colonize, or they have colonized, can put up 100,000 soldiers. They would be learning the technology, looking at their weapons while they were there, looking at their weapons and so on, because they were ruling, at that point they intermixed and intermarried and so on. So it wouldn't last forever. So the Mogul decline started in China first, then gradually elsewhere. And that raised again the question of domination of international contacts and trade. The end of the Mogul empires also turned attention to seaborne trade, as the overland Asian trade routes were disrupted. Well, during the period of the Mogul Empire, travel took place easily, just like in the Roman Empire, period of the Roman Empire. Travel was allowed because, it's one empire. The rulers are the same. So, but when it came to an end, the trade overland was disrupted. Two societies successively stepped up to the challenge. Right. We won't go any further than that because I'm just trying to refresh us where we ended the last time. We're going to be looking here now, the rise of the West, and we are going to start at imitation and international problems. Two additional causes involve Western Europe's international position. New opportunities for imitation were an obvious advantage because the invaders were there, and trust me, you're going people, the clever soldiers and politicians would view things, view the weaponry, view everything, and imitate them. And it's their country, so the invaders would not be able to watch every move and know every corner in the country and cover them. So they were able to secretly train soldiers and to create weaponry to match our weapons that were superior to what, because you're going to improve on what you see. That's how life is. You generally you imitate, but by imitating you improve. The Mogul Empire established in Asia and Eastern Europe in the late 13th and early 14th centuries provided new access to Asian knowledge and technology. You know, much not said about the Mughals, that they were a people of Central Asia. It is not even certain if these people, as all you know, you can identify China and India and Japan and so on. Right? They are not important if they exist now in any significant way. So, the Mogul Empire established in Asia and Eastern Europe in the late 13th and early 14th centuries provided new access to Asian knowledge and technology. Political stability and an openness to foreign visitors by the great Khans helped Westerners learn of Asian technologies ranging from printing to the compass and explosive powder. The compass too, that's something that is fitted to a ship for navigation. The compass, because of you could call it, no doubt that they benefited from the culture of these countries that they invaded to, but that's what they call cross-fertilization of culture or cultural exchange. Western Europe had ideal access in the Mongol period. It was not disrupted by the Mongols as Eastern Europe and so many parts of Asia were, but it was in active contact, unlike sub-Saharan Africa. Right? They were in active contact, unlike sub-Saharan Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa was not in contact with the Mongolian society, and China and the development there, which set them back technologically and economically. Because even when Europeans went there, which we shall come to, they were using cowrie shells as currency. That kind of foolishness, and so on. They didn't have a financial system. They weren't a part of the international system. So, and this is not South Africa because Egypt was different. They were not even in touch with Egypt. Egypt was a part of the international system. They were not in touch with Egypt to learn from Egypt. Internal European warfare and merchant zeal made Western Europe an eager learner, for the Asian technologies promised to meet existing military and commercial needs. So they were learning. The second international factor was the intensification of European problems in the existing world market and international arena. From the Crusades onward, Western elites had become used to increasing consumption of Asian luxury products, including spices such as cinnamon and nutmegs, silk, sugar, perfumes and jewelry. In exchange for the luxury items, Europeans mainly had cruder goods to offer. Wool, tin, copper, honey, and salt. Africa had a lot of salt. The value of European exports almost never equaled the value of what was imported from Asia. And he has not mentioned silk, but silk too. The resulting unfavorable balance of trade had to be made up in gold, but Western Europe had only a limited gold supply. By 1400, the constant drain to Asia was creating a gold famine that threatened the whole European economy with collapse. That's what is meant by European problems in the existing world market. The New World to the rescue. The Americas to the rescue, all right? We'll come to that. Furthermore, there were legitimate fears of new Muslim threat, because although the Caliphate, the Arab Caliphate, had declined and disintegrated, but a new Muslim empire came into being. That was known as the Ottoman Empire. It was taking shape, and Europeans began to fear a new Muslim surge, because they also had made a surge to capture. And of course, Europeans started invading lands that they had captured with the Crusades by sending, soldiers into the areas to take back Israel, Jerusalem, so on. So they were fearing a Muslim, but the Ottoman Empire started coming into being. Started gaining strength and muscle. Even before this, the Muslim capture of the last Crusader stronghold, the city of Acre in the Middle East. Stronghold, they captured it. In 1291, gave Muslim traders, particularly Egyptians, new opportunities to act as intermediaries in the Asian trade, for there were no Western-controlled ports left in the Eastern Mediterranean when that was captured. So things started to change. The overland route to China and to the Eastern world was not safe again. And so you're going to find that the Europeans started to move towards finding a sea route to replace it. Sea route. One response to this was a series of conquests by the city-state of Venice along the eastern coast of the Adriatic. A more important, and again, this Venice city-state, it was not all of Italy. A more important response was to begin exploring alternative routes to Asia that would bypass the Middle East and the feared and hated Muslim realms altogether. So out of this evil, good, life is full of challenges. Life is full of challenges. Don't see the challenge you face. Maybe is it death of the breadwinner? It might be sickness. Don't see the death, don't see that challenge as a setback. Find a way around it. Find a way to deal with it. A challenge. It is about to give birth to something new in your life. You might find yourself at a certain juncture and you do not know what to do. You do not know where to turn. There's a way. There's a way around it. Okay, do your reflection and email me. God bless you. God bless you.